on the underlying healing mechanisms of the body, much different than the pharmacological model that we've all been taught to believe was the answer.
Interesting. I mean, I inherently, for some reason, have a kind of something. Also, even I'm a bit cautious against, manipulating the brain with an external, especially if it's kind of an electrical device in that way. But I mean, I'm not like against it or anything. I'm just cautious in that regard. But I mean, who are the people who are producing some of these devices out there? Are there certain ones that you kind of endorse and certain ones that you don't?
Yeah, the ones that I personally use, those are the only ones that we will carry within our inventories at Earth Pulse. If we don't use them, we won't do it, and won't promote someone else's technology. I'll tell you that the simplest one that I really like for biofeedback is the JAN10's what we call our Alpha Trainer. And all it does is measure muscle tension in the forehead, because whenever you're stressed, your muscles in your forehead automatically tighten, and they create a little bit of a signal that you can pick up. And so what it does is it gives you feedback. It has a headset, so you can hear a tone in the ear, and the tone starts out as you're stressed with a very high-pitched tone, and then it drops to a lower and lower tone as you relax. And what it does is teach you how to relax, and as you relax those muscles, what happens is your breathing goes into a regular pattern, your brain waves drop into a mid-range alpha, just as a consequence of that level of relaxation. So what this device does is about an hour a day you use it, and at the end of a month's use, you generally should be able to reach that state of relaxation without the device. And then the last 10 days, what we tell people is, think about the most stressful thing in your life, whether it's your child or whether it's your boss at work, and visualize that as you're using the device and learn how to bring your state of relaxation into that alpha range, because that's the range where you want to be when you're making good intellectual decisions. And so what happens then is after a month to 40 days of use, you can let the device go. When you're in that stressful situation, you can recall, you can bring yourself right back into that relaxed state. So you don't blow up, you don't get mad, you don't get stressed, you don't get anxious. You just make the right decisions and comment in the right way. And those kinds of feedback technologies are really just measuring you, and then you're doing the work. And so, as sort of an external device that sort of helps you recognize when you're relaxed and when you're not, that's what it does. Other devices like the light and sound literally drive the brain into very specific states. But the nice thing about some of these devices, like the ones that we're carrying, you can actually make a audio tape of your own voice, for instance, giving your own affirmations, your own ideas, things you want to remember, and you can jack it in and then put yourself into that light theta state, which is a state you are between awake and asleep. But memory tends to work pretty interestingly in that state, and you can actually drop information in a subliminal form, almost in like a light hypnotic state straight into your own brain that you create yourself, which, again, for a lot of people represents a pretty useful technology.
Very interesting. I want to return to the idea a little bit of external signals and tying this in with what you just mentioned. Is it possible then that through our conscious or awareness of this, that we could actually help to kind of block out any kind of external signal that is being, that you're subjected to, meaning either if we talk about HAARP or even cell phone radiation, if we can, at least if we're talking about if it is something that is affecting the brain frequency directly and not maybe the body then, but would you say that this is true?
You can do this perhaps to some degree, but you cannot escape. Right in my environment, I don't have wireless in my environment, but I have access to 6 wireless networks because the people around me do.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So these are the questions that eventually will get raised, is are they imposing on my living space in an inappropriate way? And someday that question will actually be raised and be answered, and it'll be found that, yeah, maybe they are imposing on you in an inappropriate way. And the question is, technologies aren't going to go away, so can we make them safer? And I believe that we can.
Yeah.
Can we pick modalities that will work and achieve the technological advances that culture demands, but by the same time doing it in an enlightened way where it's not just driven by raw capitalism, it's driven by a conscious kind of capitalism that rewards innovation, but doesn't stomp you to death when you make mistakes, but encourages people to openly find their way through the technologies. Because part of the problem is these technologies are doubling. Everything that from the invention of the wheel to where we are right now will double in the next 9 to 10 months and continue to double every 9 to 10 months and getting on shorter and shorter intervals thereafter. Eventually, if we have quantum computers readily available, we'll be doubling our technology every day from the invention of the wheel to where we are at the moment.
Sheesh.
Now, we can't possibly, in this environment of change that we're already experiencing, think of every possible problem that might come about. But as they're discovered in the course of our science, we have to allow people to come forward and then help solve the problem and not always fear the total destruction of their industry. I mean, the tobacco industry knew they were lying to us long ago, so I believe industries that lie to the public deserve to be slapped into obliteration. Deserve to go away.
Yeah.
But if you're honest and you find something and you begin to try to work to solve it, we don't need to wipe those kind of companies out of business, but we need to then embrace them and find those solutions and take care of those solutions. And technology advancing as rapidly as it is in an environment all over the world that is highly motivated by litigation, that stalls the openness and the solutions. In Europe, you guys apply the precautionary principle in most of European countries, where when things start showing up that give people concern, people get access to that information. Doesn't mean something's withdrawn from the market, but at least we have a choice of what we do with it. We don't do that in the U.S., which is one of the biggest consuming nations, and the emerging economies of the world certainly don't do that either. These are principles that need to be applied much more vigorously. In the case of Europeans, in 30 years of applying the precautionary principle on health and environmental issues, you have never once been wrong. The rest of the world should take note of that.
Very interesting. I mean, more generally speaking, do you feel that it is kind of an open dialogue, or because of either if it's the political system or the nature of the, lobbying firms connected with the corporations and so forth, that this kind of information isn't getting out to people?
It's not getting out, and it is a corrupted system. I mean, in the case of cell phones, it was Dr. George Carlo that was hired by the industry, paid and given a budget of $25 million to research the subject of cell phones, who then published his 5-year study, and quickly the industry broadcast it as all good news and everything was safe. And Carlo, fortunately, had some ethics and was a very outspoken person, and he's come forward and said, no, they've misinterpreted my research. The opposite is the case.
Yeah.
So, my hope would be that we would recognize that companies oftentimes, because there's no incentive, they always work in their own self-interest, and it happens to be the bottom line. They make their money based on stockholders' interest. Global corporations, that's the way they operate. That's the way corporations are designed to operate. We need whistleblower mechanisms that create a situation where, whether you're corporate or government, you have a place to go forward and express the concerns. Think about the guy who found out cigarettes were dangerous in the tobacco industry. Wouldn't it have been nice if he had come forward in 1965 instead of in the 90s?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice if people who had the knowledge of things that are unethical, illegal, and immoral and work against human interest had a place to go to at least express that and have a full review by an independent body of some of these things?
Yeah.
I think we need mechanisms like this, and it's long overdue. Ombudsmen's, something that we have here in my part of the world and in many parts of the world, need to be there to take these kinds of issues on.
Sure, that's right, and that is actually modeled after ombudsman. That's a Swedish term, actually, so it comes from here originally.
Absolutely, and we have at our state level and our local level, we have those kinds of officers here in my part of the world, but we don't have them really at a national level. We have the General Accounting Office, but it can be so influenced by politics.
Yeah.
Every government has regulatory authorities, but a true ombudsman, in the spirit of how it was created, really can serve our interests now. And we need those in the technology areas and the government areas of and corporate areas where corporations can be as corrupt and more corrupt as governments. In fact, they are as large as governments in many cases.
Exactly. They're even larger in some cases. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of money, a tremendous amount of interest, of course, to keep that money and keep it growing. So, I mean, understandably, we have and still are, I think, in a climate where in some cases, things like murder is not, uncommon because of, a whistleblower, who knows?
Right. I think that's probably quite true. And again, why there needs to be mechanisms that give those individuals the ability and a structure, especially now, there's too much at stake. I mean, if you think about environmental weapon systems, mind control systems alone, wouldn't it be nice? And there are people within governments, within these agencies, within these research projects that are of conscience, that if they just had a way to go, and they're just people. I mean, they've got families, they've got all the obligations all of us face, and it takes a very unique person to step out of that. And without the proper mechanisms, that unique person may never rise out of the swill that they're in. And I think there's a lot of people, as we're reaching a generation of many of the beginning researchers in this area, going back to the 50s and 60s and 70s, these people are aging. We need to know. I think you need the kind of commissions they put together in South Africa. You had truth commissions after the events of apartheid, where people could come forward and admit what had happened and actually receive the benefit of one of the highest human attributes, that of forgiveness, and could move forward. But if they didn't come forward within a specified time and were identified, they got treated by the harshest rules in the land. And perhaps we need that, a cleansing. The Cold War should have ended a long time ago, but we need a different kind of perspective on what human beings are going to be. And maybe there needs to be a way for people to come forward, even when they've been involved in some pretty atrocious abuses. But we need the truth, and I think we need to move beyond where our governments have gone and try to find some solutions that are not driven by fear and paranoia, but driven by higher attributes of human nature.
Oh, totally agree. I mean, I think and I think one key area to all of this is the people need to be, they need to be interested again, in their environment, in what is, what they are subjected to consciously and unconsciously. They need to be foremost aware, and we need to do that with education. And I think that your kind of work helps really along to give people the proper information so they can make good decisions, basically.
Well, I think it's all a process. I mean, we're all sharing in that, and I think there's a lot of going on. People underestimate what each of us individually can do, but I can say that everything that we each individually do matters at this point in time, whether it's talking to our neighbor or our friends or more than that. And we all have within our reach a sphere of influence. It may be limited to those around us immediately, but you know what? That's where every major change that ever faced humanity started, was by people acting on what they believe to be right and good, and putting a little bit of their human energy behind it, and recognize that there's millions of other people doing the same. And I think that's ultimately what it will take. People are going to go through a lot of changes. We're going to see a lot of things in the next few years that I think are going to awaken people to the fact that we have no choice but to become involved, because otherwise we're involved by default, and being the victim of our own advances isn't the approach that most of us would like to take. I think it's directing those advances to serve our interests in a better way. It's going to require a vigilant population like it's never been before, and creation of new institutions that have the capacity and capability of safeguarding populations from the very advances that could free us.
Yep, totally agree. Very interesting. I think that is a good point to round things up for this time. I think that this has been an excellent interview, and thank you again for coming on the program. I want to leave the last couple of minutes to you so you can tell us a little bit about some of the material that you have out there that is connected with what we've been talking about here today. And I personally would like to hear a little bit more, if you will, about that the biofeedback device that you mentioned.
Sure. The Anten's Alpha Train, or something that we've carried for a while, it's one I really like because it's simple. It just measures muscle tension in the forehead and provides a feedback, so you hear a tone, so you can adjust essentially your stress levels. It's really a stress modulator. It teaches you how to modulate your own stress levels, and eventually you can do it without the device. We have light and sound devices. We have HemiSync, and a lot of information about these at our website at earthpulse.com. And there's lots of free information there as well.